So we have been hearing a lot recently about the Arctic blast in Texas and how it caused all sorts of havoc. So was it really climate change? Was it a just a freak weather winter occurrence? What's actually going on here? Well, it's important to actually understand what is happening here. So let's take a look at the data. Now, it's very important to understand what is going on with the sea ice here. Now, the reason why we need to acknowledge it is because if we acknowledge it for the winter forecast, and everyone agreed that, hey, this is kind of unusual and we're not sure what is going to have an impact on the polar vortex, then you have to acknowledge it within winter of it being a factor. The fact that sea ice was so far below normal is a climate indicator. It is. There's no way to get around that. Now, the question that needs to be asked, and we don't know this answer, is whether or not this is a steady state situation. If you continue to see this as being a standard, and quite frankly, it's been trending in that direction, then you have to consider the fact that it is having an influence. Now, I did a check, and I saw no influence whatsoever from any type of volcanoes. I know I got that. Well, what about subsea volcanoes? Nothing. Not up in the Arctic. You could say that for the Pacific, but we're not in the tropical Pacific. We're in the Arctic, so you can't really use that argument. There has been some thoughts about, well, maybe methane releases. No, that's more off towards the Atlantic. So this is clearly a case where we're seeing warming taking place, and it's having an influence on the sea ice. And this is really important because when you get a reduction of Arctic sea ice, it disrupts the polar vortex. As a result, the background noise of that and the disruption of the polar vortex set up the situation to cause this major outbreak that happened in Texas. Now, it's easy to blame one thing and only one thing. There's a variety of factors, not to mention the fact that people who should have known better and who have been warned several times since, I don't know, the 1980s, that, hey, winterize your stuff, didn't do it. That's how you ended up in this situation. Can this happen again? In fact, it has happened before. It happened in the 1800s. Of course, you didn't have a lot of electrical outlets and whatnot in the 1800s, but it did happen before. And it happened because the polar vortex was severely disrupted. But this isn't anything that is really that new. The term blue norther in Texas and Oklahoma, believe me, because I used to live out there, is not an unusual term. It's something to discuss that they discuss frequently every time temperatures crash into the 30s and 40s. This time, it crashed into the single digits, and in some cases below freezing. So this was a very unique and very dangerous event that unfortunately cost lives and disrupted infrastructure and caused all sorts of problems. Now, the question that we have to answer, and we don't know yet, that's the truth, okay, is whether or not this is a steady state situation or not. Because if we see this type of scenario setting up again for next winter and the winter after that, guess what? We're going to be a threat for these same situations once again and continuing to become more amplified. It's called an amplified Arctic evolution. Now, can this readjust and rebound? Absolutely. There's several factors that also influence the stratosphere, from solar influences to just what we're doing these days, with our improving in terms of CO2 and all that other stuff. So there is certainly some improvement on the way, okay? And certainly this could be a one-off situation. But if you're asking whether or not this was climate influenced or climate change influenced, well, you have data that certainly would support that declaration. So it's important to actually acknowledge the data and go forward from there. That is your climate discussion for today. Have a wonderful day, and as always, stay safe out there.